Hi, my name is Jewel Dixon. I am in Home Human Human Services for 4442, Professor Valerie Grant. I am doing a interview um, with family intervention for drug addiction and alcoholism. We're supposed to do about our movie, which is called, my movie was named The Death of Richie. And the reason why I picked this movie was because, of course, everybody had already picked the good ones. But it was kind of interesting to me the way that the um, the family handled the situation. Uh, they didn't really handle it as by the book, and I thought that that was interesting because they got the kind. Well, the father. Let me start from the beginning. This family has two children and they've never been had any issues with drugs or alcoholism. They had, social moments where they drank a little alcohol, but they were professional people. They did not um, just enjoy just drinking it, or they were uppity people. So they were, those things didn't really have any value in their lives, drugs and all that. They never had that issue. But their oldest son, who was in high school, who was 16, his name was Richie, decided that you know, he was going to school, and this was almost his last year. I think he had one more year, and it was during the summer month where he would be off before he go into his senior year, and the issue started during that summer when he was out of school with his friends and things, and they started just hanging out, and he started doing drugs, and it kind of got to be an issue before the summer was out. Now his father thought that if he could just get a job or do something productive, then he wouldn't have all these problems, which it didn't matter because he was going to do whatever he wanted to do, and his father wasn't always around him. So, and the issue wasn't the father, I mean, the son. It was the father trying to make the son do what he wanted him to do, and it was all just getting too heavy for the son to uh, to be able to handle all of that. So, in my interview, I would like to bring the whole family in. Well, the family in so that we could have an interview and just talk with each other and get on the same accord so that we can find out what skills and what would be the best vineyard to take so that Richie could have uh, of the family together so that he can have the support that he needed. So this is very interesting to me. Now, Richie's father thought that okay, he couldn't get him to do what he wanted to do. So Richie did get a job during the summer for a little while, but then it was like for 2 months, and then maybe a month or so, and he maybe not that long, but he quit the job. Excuse me. And his father, thought that okay, well maybe he can do something else, So he got him to sell all these tickets and go to this dance, and he kind of thought everything was behind him, but it wasn't. So Richie was still, had his friends had found him at his job, and they had started hanging out again, and Richie, was kind of like on his own because his dad was working all the time, but his mother, she was there. She knew the issues behind what was really going on, but the father said to himself, I'm assuming that he did not understand the situation, which as bad as it was. He thought that he can go to the courts and have the police to come and maybe scare him straight. And that didn't happen either. But so my thing would be to bring the family in for an interview and, to sit down and to understand exactly what's going on. And by me watching the movie, I already kind of knew that, okay, the father had other intentions. He did not want to go to therapy. He thought that the courts could kind of scare him straight, and he just wouldn't heed to going to any meetings. The mother, on the other hand, was very open to anything that would work. And Richie, by his father not being so committed to what was going on, he decided that he didn't want to get therapy either. But when they went to court, the judge asked if they would do therapy, and the father straight up said no. And he did. He went to one. He didn't really go into it. He did not go into the lady's office, but the mother did, and she found out that there was 12 steps, and there were um, services that were out there that could help the family, that could help them through most, the unanswered questions. And help them to understand some of the situations, and which is what basically I would do. I would help them to understand what addiction is, and I would talk to them about how addiction works. And it is not something that you can just work away, or because it gets to be something inside of you, and it kind of controls you. Your will is not your own. So people, and I think that the father had that idea that if he worked hard and he kept that, wouldn't work. But anyway, Richie was a really good kid, and trying to get the father into the meeting was not working. But the mother came in, and she wanted to know as much as she could. And when she went, she saw that there were people dealing with the same issues that her family was dealing with these drugs, and their children were there, and their husbands was there, and they were trying to figure out what they could do. And the therapist just kind of let them talk about their issues, how things are within their family, and the stuff that gets them upset about, the triggers that causes their kids to do these things. And it was kind of interesting that Richie's mom was able to sit through the 12 steps, and just kind of get to understand, but the father didn't. And my thought is, if I was to deal with someone who was on drugs, who was addicted to drugs and alcohol, which is what we're dealing with here, I would try to get them to understand that that is something that they work through. There may be some downfalls, and there may be some things that trigger. So we will have to try to get on that level of understanding how to understand what we're dealing with and each other. And sometimes when you got people like Richie wasn't a bad kid, but when he did drugs, he was a bad kid. He was out of it. And that's what I think scared his father so much, because his father didn't ever see that part of him that made him feel like he was growner than he was, or over him. And his father uh, had a gun, and he had it in the house. But even though Richie knew the gun was there, he didn't ever bother the gun. His father had it locked up. And the night that Richie was going through his one of his rages, he kind of got his father really upset, and his father pulled the gun out and he shot him. So the thing about that, when you go into therapy, you get to understand. People start talking, and they're talking about the things that really bother them in this situation. And that is what I would have tried to get Richie's father to understand, that in every recovery There's some ups and there's some downs, and we just have to understand what we're dealing with, who and why. The models of how to sit down and understand what it is that we're dealing with. And that is what the father, I think, did not understand because he never went to therapy. He never tried to go through the 12 steps and understand, the ups and the downs of being on drugs and being an addict. It, we've learned that the drug addiction is a disease, you know, and just like alcoholism, and that there are so many stages that people go through. And then you have to understand too that there are many young, not just young people that are going through it. There are older people who are going through it. They got gambling, but just so happened that Richie was, he was a person that had a drug addiction and an alcoholism problem. So Richie was dealing with two demons that he couldn't understand. And when he wanted to understand and when he did good, he really needed to be told that that was a good, he did a good job and he could overcome this. But without the family involvement, it would be very difficult to see Richie recovery be successful. I'm thinking about how I would have handled getting his father in to therapy and asking, what it is that he think, about what's going on, because I know that it was hard. They had a kid, a younger child in the home that uh, was not. He was in middle school. He had no dealings with drugs. So, and I'm thinking that the father was thinking more about that too, be just afraid. Some people just get afraid of things that they don't understand. And I think that when you're dealing with issues, you have to be able to present the skills and the knowledge of knowing that it's okay. It's okay that you're going through this. It's okay that you had these situations, and a lot of time people are embarrassed. They're embarrassed. They can't get. They don't want the people to know that their children are going through that they're struggling with these issues. And I think that because Richie's mom was trying to understand what her child was going through, gave her an advantage over the father because he didn't have any kind of knowledge. So that caused everything to be um, a little out of the ordinary for everyone. So nobody was on the same accord. So that would have been something that we would have discussed. Getting everybody on the same accord and allowing them to know that there were ways to uh, for Richard to have a successful recovery. I think that when we look at this too, we have to understand that there are models, and you have those different types of skills. I mean, the ways that people are dealing with issues, and you have to understand that there are. Oh yeah, you have to be able to uh, give them awards. You have to be able to help them to when they memory relapse and they start doing other things, trying to find a a reason to be all upset about everything they're going through. So it's good to be able to to have knowledge about the circumstances that they're going through. They need most of the ones that are in recovery or trying to get into recovery. They need to have the kind of connection with the therapist to make them feel confident that they're able to accomplish the things that they're trying to set up to gain recovery, and just also be able to have that kind of security and confidence. It's important that we, as therapists, to me, just to be able to get the family comfortable enough to begin to seek um, the CBT, allow them to understand that there are things that mentally that's going to happen, and we could see that, and these things are definitely something that we want to try and get the family involved in, and to understand that being in these situations for as drugs and alcohol, it's not the end of the world. It's a bad situation, but it's not the end of the world. We can work through it with the skills and the knowledge that the therapist has for them to have. And I think that this is basically the end of what I'm going to say tonight. um, Thank you. Have a blessed day. Amen.